State, and she's running for first vice chair of the Republican Party. Salleigh Grubbs.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eddie. Keep me on schedule. I don't know how much time I have, so just let me know.
Okay.
Somebody wave at me. Thank you all for allowing me to come speak to you tonight. I love seeing all the familiar faces, and through social media and that kind of thing, you get to be friends with people, but you don't ever get to see them and spend time with them. So I'm really glad to be here. It's been my privilege and my honor to serve as the chair of the Cobb GOP. I am term limited out. We can serve two-year terms, so I'm term limited out. And this last convention cycle in 23, I was elected as the over 80K chair, which I have really, really enjoyed. And we have some good stuff happening all across the state with our counties. There's 32 counties across the state that are over 80,000, as Eddie said. And it's really been a special group of people, and that's getting ready to change over with the convention cycle this time with the election of new chairs. And so we've done some really good things when it comes to communication. Previously, the chair folk, as I call them sometimes, they haven't really been in communication, but my big passion is election integrity. And so one of the things that I wanted to be sure and do is to make sure all the chairs were communicating across, really across the entire state, but specifically those 32 counties, because sometimes what happens in, say, in Cobb County could be happening, in Muskogee County. And previously, we weren't really communicating to see those things. And we've seen it, for instance, in Fulton County. Some of the things that have happened in Fulton County happen in Lowndes County. But if we don't have good communication and we don't have folks that are doing the poll watching and managing those things, communicating, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. I was really excited this year to be part of the RNC National Election Integrity Team. So that was a major thing for me, because I personally got to work with Senator David Perdue, who helped manage that. I was also able to train people all across the country on voter review panel and some deeper, more meaningful observation when it came to the election machines, the EMS systems, and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to talk election integrity, I am happy to talk about it. I'm very passionate about it. I have also presented at the state election board quite a few times. We kind of had a logjam on the state election board, and so it wasn't my rule. I didn't write the rule. Bridget Thorne wrote the rule, and but I presented the rule. We got that rule passed, and that kind of broke the logjam on getting rules passed. And that's why you see the Democrats freaking out so bad. They don't like the fact that we were able to get rules passed, but they're common sense and really bipartisan rules. I just had another one that I presented. The good thing is that with the leadership of Chairman McKoon, we have gotten our election integrity team to present those rules to now go to the legislature to be part of legislation for the state of Georgia, so that we don't have to just rely on the election board rules, because as we know, Democrats like to break the rules. And so we want to be sure and get that codified into the official code of Georgia. So many thanks to Chairman McKoon for everything that he's done to lead that charge with the election integrity team. The one thing that I'm very passionate about is grassroots, getting the grassroots involved. On our election integrity team, when we reconstituted that in 2023, we were able to have a lot of people added to the team to help offer input and observation and provide suggestions that they might not be party people, but they still had a seat at the table. And so that's also another thing that I'm very passionate about, is making sure that everyone who wants to have a positive, forward-moving seat at the table to help carry the party forward, that they have that. And I love it because Josh always entertains my crazy ideas and is very much a part of doing that. So I'm very thankful for that. So that's kind of who I am. I have lived in Cobb County all my life, pretty much, and was not involved in the party until 2020 when the election was stolen. I can say that and not worry about going to jail, because I did spend my time with, have y'all heard of Nathan Wade? Do y'all know who Nathan Wade is? Yeah, so I got to spend some quality time with him. which was really pleasant. And so there, yeah, fortunately I had good counsel sitting there beside me. But you know, Fanny's BFF, Fannie Willis's BFF. The reason he wanted to talk to me was because of my questioning the 2020 election. So I praise God every day that I wake up and it's like Christmas and Donald Trump is our president. That was my goal when I got involved. My goal has always been fair elections since 2020. My goal was to see President Donald J. Trump back in the White House. And I'm telling you, I do praise God every day he's there, because God knows where we would be as a nation if he was not. I think we've seen what political persecution is about. I was also very, very passionate about the alternate electors from 2020. David Schaefer is still going through it big time. He is still being persecuted and prosecuted, along with Kathy Latham, who is a good friend of mine. And I'm thankful that because of Josh, the state party has defended them, and the legal fees are they're astronomical and out of control. And Josh was the one person, that was my issue in choosing a chairman in 2023, was someone who would stand with people who were going through things like that. And he has lived up to that, and he has stood with David Schaefer and Kathy Latham. And so for that, I'm also very grateful to Josh for doing that. So I'm blessed to have been serving on the state executive committee with Denise Burns and as the 14th district chairman. We have a great group of folks that have been focused on winning Georgia. We did that with President Trump, and so the reason that I'm running for first vice chair, I'm not good at giving political stump speeches, but I'm going to tell you from my heart is that
Thank you.
Is, you know, I think that we have a good team, and I'm passionate about seeing that everybody has a voice. And I want to carry that forward, and working with people like Denise and the other district chairman, I think we're going in the right direction, and we need to continue that forward momentum, because we will in 2026, which is here today, 2026 is here now, we will have the most expensive election in the history of this country.
Yes.
So whoever it is that runs for Senate in Georgia, we are going to have a huge battle, and we have to be out there as fervently as we were for Donald Trump, and we have to win that election. So there's no time for distraction. We have to have fair elections, and we have to win those elections. So I'm begging you, please, to get involved, stay involved. Just because Donald Trump won does not mean that we can sit here and not do anything. So stay involved. I would like to continue on the state committee, because I can't, since I won't be a chairman anymore. So that's why I'm running for first vice chair. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. And any questions at the end, I'm totally open. There's no question that's off limits. So feel free to ask me.
Say your name again.
It's Salleigh. It's spelled S-A-L-L-E-I-G-H. Like Sal and Lee, S-A-L-L-E-I-G-H. And my last name is Grubbs, G-R-U-B-B-S. G-R-U-B-B-S.
And is there anyone running against you declared yet?
Not that I know of now. Nobody has notified the party. I hear that there's someone who's trying to get someone to run against me. But you know what? I would not be involved if it wasn't for God anyway, because that's where my passion comes from, is from Him. So whoever runs, I wish them all the luck in the world, but don't worry me.
So Salleigh has my full support, just so you know. She's been in election integrity forefront down there at the state capitol, pushing at the election board, so she's been great. The other person who has my full support is our current chairman of the Republican Party, Josh McKoon. Now, Josh has been in politics before I was, really, because when I first got involved, he was a state senator. And the state Senate committee meetings were not filmed. There was no video of them. until Josh started filming on Facebook. He would FaceTime the meetings. And the other senators didn't really like it, so they decided they would just they put cameras in all the state Senate rooms. The House had it, but the Senate didn't. The Senate was meeting kind of secretly over there, and nobody knew what was going on. So he has been for transparency in our state Senate and in the whole legislative process. He has been the champion of the grassroots before I was involved in politics, so like 15, 20 years. And he is just, he's done amazingly as a chair. He was the perfect chair because he was a lawyer. And we had all those legal battles to fight.
Yes.
And if we had not had somebody like him, our legal bills would have probably been 10 times more and been less effective. So please welcome Josh McKoon.
Thank you very much. Eddie's making me feel old. But it is true. I served in the state Senate for 8 years. When I got there, we did not have streaming in our meetings. And so if you wanted to know what your state senator was up to and you lived in Whitfield County, Georgia, you had to drive to downtown Atlanta. You had to hope that traffic didn't stop you from getting there in time for the committee meeting. You had to go through security at the Capitol or the Legislative Office building. And then you had to hope that when you got to the committee room, that there was room for you to sit. When I started filming those meetings, by the way, they were pushing gambling like they do every year. And I had some lobbyists stop me in the hall and tell me they took the feed that I was delivering of that and put it on a big screen in another room because the Georgia Baptists had come and filled the entire room up with preachers. Transparency is important. It's important to be able to interact with your government. And I spent 8 years kind of being a thorn in the side of some of the powerful people in our own party because I didn't always feel like the leadership of our party was leading the way you would want them to lead. And so that's why I pushed ethics reform. First couple of years I was down there, Georgia was one of only 3 states in the nation where there was no limit on what you could give a legislator. You could not write a campaign check, but you could take them to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. You could buy them a new car, and as long as you disclosed it, it was perfectly legal. We put an end to that. I was and the author of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 2014. I was telling people things back then like, there are going to be men invading women's spaces and we need protections in the law for that. And people said I was crazy and that would never happen. So a lot of those things unfortunately got borne out. And it looks like this year maybe is going to be the year that the Georgia legislature passes a Religious Freedom Act. But I just tell you that to give you a little sense of who I am and where I come from. I'm from Columbus, Georgia. My father is a lawyer. My mother was a victim service officer with the district attorney's office. She advocated for victims of violent crime and their families. And my grandparents, my dad's parents, were sort of serial entrepreneurs. They had a grocery store. They had a filling station in downtown Columbus. And so I've had the opportunity to kind of live the American dream. I've been able to do exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And I think that's a privilege, and I've wanted to give back. That's why I ran for the state legislature. And in 2023, I'll be very honest with you, I ran for Secretary of State in 2018, tried to, win that election, was not successful. And I kind of thought that would be it for me in terms of high-profile political involvement. And I never would have, in my wildest nightmares, imagined that somebody questioning an election, and as a lawyer, somebody filing a lawsuit and saying, this election process was wrong, and we believe the outcome that was certified is incorrect, would result in a criminal prosecution. And David Schaefer was and is one of my best friends, not just politically, but personally. And when David called me up and said, I don't think I'm gonna be able to run again because I think I may be indicted for standing up for honest elections in Georgia, is this something you'd be willing to take on the baton? And that's sort of daunting, right? You want to help your friend, and then you're also told, the guy that was in this right before you wound up getting indicted. But I felt very strongly after talking it over with my wife and praying about it that it was the right thing for us to do. And so I ran for chairman. And some of you were involved in that process, and I was elected in Columbus in June of 2023. And so that's kind of what's brought me here this evening. I want to talk for just a minute or two about what I think we've accomplished over the last year and a half. And I also want to recognize Salleigh and Denise, because this is not a one-person operation. All of us are volunteers, and we worked very hard, long hours together to get the result that we got, and I'm very grateful to you personally for everything you did to help make that victory possible. I set out really two goals that I talked about throughout the campaign. One was we were going to carry Georgia for the Republican nominee for president, and number two was we were going to put a stop to Fani Willis's phony witch hunt against our electors. So I'm going to start with the election for a minute. So if you think about it, June 2023, we didn't know who the nominee was going to be. We went through that process. By the time we got to January of 2024, I think it was obvious probably to everybody in this room that the nominee was going to be Donald Trump. And so we had a state committee meeting down in St. Simons Island, Georgia, and we brought forward a resolution for the state committee to come out and say, look, we need to put an end to the division here. We got to face the Democrats. The state committee of the Georgia Republican Party is going to endorse Donald Trump. Now, unfortunately, that was not successful because we had people in our organization that were so committed to throwing sand in the gears and, you know, whatever you're for, I'm against, that they just reflexively opposed this effort to let's unify and get behind Donald Trump. Now, there was going to be a story, this was on a Saturday, there was going to be a story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on Monday about how we were, you know, not together, there's this big rift, there's some people for Nikki Haley, there's some people for this person and that person. And so I put out a statement with our two RNC members at the time, calling on Governor Haley to get out of the race and for us to all get behind Donald Trump. And that stopped that story from being about us being divided, and instead the story that came out Monday was, you know, unprecedented statement from Georgia Republican Party leaders in support of Donald Trump. Now, I think that's what a leader does, right? You recognize a situation and you try to move things forward. Because our goal, remember, elect the Republican for president. So let's get together, let's get everybody on the same page, let's stop wasting resources fighting each other, let's start fighting the Democrats, and that's what we did. So we did a couple of things, I think, very well to help make sure that we won this election. And remember, before November of last year, it had been 8 years since we had won a statewide federal election. We had 2020, which we could talk about all night. We had the runoffs in 2021, and then we had the Herschel Walker race in 2022. And so 2024 was important not only to win the White House, but it was also important to send a message to national Democrats, stay out of Georgia, right? This is a center-right state. This is a conservative state. So what we did is we said, we're gonna focus, and we worked with the Trump campaign on this, on low propensity voters. Almost every election you hear people talk about swing voters. These people are kind of in the middle, sometimes they're for us, sometimes they're for the Democrats. That's not who we went after in this election. Who we went after in this election are people we knew for a certainty, if they got in that voting booth, they were gonna vote for Donald Trump, but they don't vote every time. They didn't vote in 2020. And I think I'm gonna share a statistic with you that's gonna surprise you. So alongside that strategy of let's go get low propensity voters to vote, we said we need people to vote early. And I went everywhere I could in this state talking about it. And a lot of times people would kind of roll their eyes and say, we don't need to vote early, that's gonna give the Democrats this advantage, they're gonna know how many votes we have. And I said, look, we win by moving these people that don't always vote to the polls. Every one of them we get to vote early is one less voter we have to worry about on election day. So that is where our focus was. Our focus was get people to vote early, and particularly get people that didn't vote in 2020 to vote early. That was the game plan. So how did we do? We had about 5.2 million people vote in the November presidential election in this state. Over 4 million of them voted before Election Day. Now that is a testament to the work of the people in this room and the work of Georgia Republican Party volunteers from all over the state. But here's the statistic that I think is really going to surprise you. Over 800,000 of those voters did not vote in 2020. Over 20% of the people that voted early did not vote in 2020. And when I saw that on Friday, November the 1st, I was like, we're going to win this election. We're going to win this election because we moved enough of these people that we know will vote for Donald Trump that didn't vote 4 years ago. But then, of course, we had Election Day as well. We worked very hard on Election Day. Another 1.2 million people voted. And we won Election Day voting. We won early voting by the largest margin we've ever won in a presidential year. And we lost on paper absentee ballots, which is also what happened in 2020. But guess what the difference was? There were about 20% of the number of paper absentee ballots that there were in the 2020 election. And the AJC actually wrote a story about this where they said 374,000 absentee voters vanish. Now, these weren't people that chose to vote early or voted in person. They just didn't show up at all, right? And they acted like it was some big mystery. Well, let me tell you what happened. We changed the law to say you have to have a wet signature on an absentee ballot request. In 2020, I could get on one of these and just keep requesting ballots. We got rid of that, and poof, 374,000 people that voted didn't vote in 2024, okay? In an election that was decided by 115,000 votes, that matters, right? So our field organization was second to none. If you dealt with Trump Force 47 staff, those were paid employees of the Georgia Republican Party. If you were operating out of a Trump Force 47 office at any time, we either leased and paid for that office or we paid for part of that office. So the Georgia Republican Party and Trump Force 47 were the same, one and the same. We, from an election integrity standpoint, we had an unprecedented effort. Salleigh touched on it some when she was talking earlier, but we hired more election lawyers than we ever have had in the history of the Georgia Republican Party. We recruited and trained more volunteer election lawyers than we ever have before in the history of the Georgia Republican Party. Thanks to many of you in this room, we recruited more poll watchers than we ever have had in the history of the Georgia Republican Party. We covered more poll watching shifts than we ever have had before in the history of the Georgia Republican Party. And that did two things. It put more eyes on this process to give us, the confidence that this was going to be a fair process. But what it also did is a lot of people that would tell me when I would come to meetings like this, Josh, it's rigged anyway, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to participate. By showing how aggressive we were, it got people to say, I'm going to get off the couch and I'm going to go vote because they're on the field doing everything they can to make sure my vote's going to count. We also had tremendous success at the legislature. In the 2024 legislative session, we got 3 bills passed that did a wide array of things for election integrity. I'm going to mention just one piece and explain how it played a part in the overall election. We got the law changed on the paper that is used for our ballots. Watermark security grade paper was mandated for the 2024 election. We also got the law changed on ballot access. In every presidential election since I've been alive, I think, maybe with the exception of the Perot election, you had a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian in Georgia. That puts us on unlevel ground because Libertarians are more likely to come from disaffected Republicans, but there's no left-wing candidate for Democrats to vote for. Until 2024, we got the Green Party, the Socialist Party, and the, I think for Justice for All, some minor party on the ballot. They're all 3 left-wing parties. The Democrats are suing to keep them off the ballot because they're the guardians of democracy, right? They're really happy for you to have choices as long as they can decide what your choices are going to be. So while we're litigating that, the Secretary of State's office prints all the ballots. And the court says, we're throwing off 2 of these candidates. Well, the Secretary of State's office comes back and says, guess what? There's no more watermark security grade paper available to reprint all the ballots. So all of the candidates' names are on all of the ballots. Now they put little signs in the polling stations and whatnot for you. But at the end of the day, those 3 left-wing candidates took 40,000 votes away from Kamala Harris. In an election, we won by 115,000 votes. So these things matter. Attention to detail matters. We filed and intervened in more election integrity lawsuits than we ever have in the history of the Georgia Republican Party, and won more of those lawsuits than ever before in the history of the Georgia Republican Party. So we were not only adding new election integrity measures to our laws, we were making sure that we were protecting measures that were in place. We won a court case today. I read about it on the way up here. Democrats were trying to challenge a shorter window on absentee ballots, requests and returns. And it got thrown out of court by a judge today, and that's a case that we're engaged in. So that process doesn't end just because the election's over with. We're down at the legislature this year doing the same thing, working on these issues. We had a lot of firsts. We had the first nationally televised ad campaign we ever did as a Georgia Republican Party in November of 2023. We went on Newsmax and did a national ad buy talking about the witch hunt with Fani Willis and why we needed to stand with Donald Trump and our electors. And so that kind of shifts me over to talk about the second goal, which was to get rid of the witch hunt that Fani Willis was pursuing. And I could talk all night about this. I'm not going to, don't worry. But just to set the stage, when I got elected in June of 2023, all 16 of our presidential electors, these are not people who are paid, these are grassroots volunteers like everyone in this room, were all under investigation by a grand jury. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about if it was a member of your family. We had a lady, Kay Godwin. Kay's in her 80s. She's a grandmother. She lives in Southeast Georgia. She had an investigators from the Fulton County DA's office come to her home in Blackshear and interrogate her with an attorney that we furnished present. But that's the kind of ghoulish garbage that the far left was up to in this case. So we started off with 16 people under attack. August 14th, 2023, they indict 3 of them. Why not all 16? Guess who were the 3 that got indicted? A state senator, my immediate predecessor, Davis Schaefer, and Kathy Latham, a school teacher, retired school teacher. Those are the 3 who was on the executive committee of the Georgia Republican Party. So they targeted the juiciest political targets. It was never about any kind of actual crime being committed. It was about getting headlines and getting book deals and raising money for a soulless politician who cares nothing but for her own ambition. So August 14th, Salleigh referred to this. That day, that one day, we had to spend over $400,000 to retain lawyers for those 3 individuals that were indicted, just on that day. Between the time that Chairman Schaefer was in and the time that I was in, up to this point, we've spent well over $2 million defending these folks. This is while we're raising money to fight the election and do everything else that we're trying to do. Now, the good news is that the lawyers for David Schaefer and Kathy Latham filed a motion to disqualify D.A. Willis. And it is that motion that led to the hearing in February that brought out all the dirty laundry about her boyfriend being steered $750,000 of taxpayer money. And it was that disclosure that led to her being disqualified from the case. And all we're waiting on now is for the Georgia Supreme Court to uphold that disqualification. And I believe probably by the time we meet in June, this case will be dismissed. And that's because of your hard work. She's going to have her job for now. You know, I think that there are some federal authorities. I think there's some federal authorities looking at her. I think that we're going to see maybe some other grand juries being convened before it's all over with. But I say all that to you just to say, and look, none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. Our team for the last year and a half wasn't perfect. But I think you got to ask yourself this question. What is the purpose of the Georgia Republican Party? And I think our purpose, our primary purpose, is to win elections. I think the primary purpose, the primary test for 2024 was, did you carry Georgia for Donald Trump or not? I think that was the challenge that was placed before us. And we met that challenge. We succeeded. And so the question now is, as we look ahead to 2026, we face another critical set of elections. Georgia is the best opportunity in America to add to the Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. It's not even close. John Ossoff should never have been a U.S. Senator. He is the most unqualified person that I've seen in the U.S. Senate ever. I used to say when I would bring this up that it was sort of a horse race between him and Senator Fetterman. But if I ever see Senator Fetterman, I'm going to apologize to him because it's not close. It's clearly John Ossoff. So we have a chance to fire him and replace him with a good Republican. And here's the other thing. We have to hold on to the governor's mansion and all these constitutional offices. These are all open seats. It is much more difficult to hold on to an open seat than to re-elect an incumbent. There are a whole lot of reasons for that. But what all of that means is that we've got to have the machinery to move our people back out to vote like we did in 2024, while fighting the election integrity battle, while doing all of the other things we do. I could talk about communications. I could talk about how many media hits we did. I could go on and on about all the things we did to advance this mission. But honestly, at the end of the day, what you need is a leader who is going to ignore the noise and focus on the goal. And the goal is to win these elections 601 days from today. We've got to win these elections. So I am not your guy if you think the purpose of the Georgia Republican Party is to get us all in a circle and argue with each other about who's the most conservative and who's the best at this or that and rip each other apart. I'm not your guy if that's what you want to do. If you want to win in 2026, I'm your Huckleberry. You know? So that's really my pitch to you. I'm delighted that we are having the state convention in Dalton. One of the promises that I made, I think that's worth applauding. One of the promises I made in 2023 was that we were going to have a statewide committee, and we're going to have a couple of people at the state office deciding where the state convention was going to be. And we respected that process. The state committee got a couple of options. Dalton was one of them. And I believe, I go back in this about 20 years, that this is the first time that the state convention is being held in Dalton, Georgia. And that is something to celebrate as we attempt to be truly a statewide organization, right? So I'll end with this because I was told a long time ago that if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. I'm asking you to come to your county convention here in Whitfield County. I'm asking you on March 22nd, Saturday, March 22nd, and seek to be a delegate to the state convention here in Dalton. And then I would ask for your vote to be your chairman for 2 more years, because I believe, as Salleigh mentioned, we have a lot of positive momentum. There are a lot of good things happening. We've sort of got the wind at our back. And I think if we have the right leadership team, we're going to be able to deliver another big across-the-board victory like we did in 2024. We had over 130 counties in this state move to the right in the 2024 election. That is an earthquake. That does not just happen. That's because of grassroots work. And again, it's not about me. It's about everybody that's involved. But you got to have the right leadership to move in the right direction. So I'd love to have your vote. Glad to answer any questions or just generally get out of your way. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Do you have any questions for him? Stacy?
Hi. So I hear what you're saying about the work that was done in election integrity. That's my number one focus point, has been since 2020, and that's where my focus has been involved. But my experience with the Georgia GOP and election integrity is that while I support the secure paper ballots, we still have mail-in ballots, we still have machines, we still aren't hand counting them. We audit a max this year of 8%, which this county only did 2%, which I don't even know why that is. And, so we have major issues still. We had, this past election was the best candidate against the world's worst candidate, so I don't think we can attribute that to, all to the fact that there was some great effort among the get out the vote. My concern, specifically addressing your leadership as the GOP, was in 2023 at the Perry Fish Fry. Myself, along with many grassroots election integrity people, showed up wearing paper ballots, police shirts to speak with our top profile Republican legislators. And we were told at the door by the Georgia GOP district chair, Chan Jones, we could not enter. He called State Patrol to take us out for wearing t-shirts. And we were not there to cause a ruckus. We were there to speak and to share our concerns about machines counting our votes, etc. And we complied, changed our shirts, which was ridiculous. It was all on film. You came into the fish fry, didn't speak to any of us, and never made a statement against that action. So I have a big issue with that. I'd just like to know why you didn't make a statement about it.
Sure. Let me start with something you said, which is that because Donald Trump's a great candidate, we must not have done any voter turnout.
No, I
In
didn't say
20
that.
that is what you said.
I said you didn't contribute at all.
You said that we had the best candidate versus the worst candidate, so you can't attribute the victory at all
No,
to our
I did not
voter
say
turnout
that.
efforts.
You just quoted me.
She didn't say that.
Well,
Go ahead.
we're going to disagree about the premise of that. In 2020, we obviously had a lot of issues around the election, a lot of issues around election integrity. Do we have a perfect election system in Georgia in 2025, 2024? No, we don't. Have we made tremendous strides because of the effort of the Georgia Republican Party? Absolutely we have.
How we had
And-
tremendous? What's been tremendous?
I mean, I've been talking about it. I mean, you look at Senate Bill 202, which the Democrats are fighting right
Which is
now.
terrible, because it codified
You know.
drop boxes.
So you would have preferred the law beforehand, where drop boxes could be placed anywhere.
It was a consent decree. The
Correct.
Republicans made it a law.
Correct. So you would have preferred 2020 where people were throwing voting equipment in a
I'm
van
speaking
and
of it
driving
all,
around?
Which, that should have been the priority of the Republican Party, and since you had some contacts to push through some legislation this past session, why couldn't we be pushing through, get rid of machines, hand count paper ballots?
So obviously, the goal is to do exactly what President Trump has talked about, which is one-day voting on paper ballots, hand counted.
Yeah.
That has always been the goal.
What's
Now-
the probability of that, in your opinion?
Look, I think it's very challenging to get it through with the current
Why?
leadership.
We have Republican trifecta.
So I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is we go to the legislature every year and we make measurable progress every single year. We had a much better election integrity environment in 2024 than we did in 2020. That's a fact. We had tremendous voter turnout operations. Anybody that looks at this, any neutral observer that looks at it, Democrats, Republicans, Independents will tell you our strategy of moving people that didn't vote in 2020 to the polls was the difference maker in this election. That was about all the work done by volunteers all over the state working with Trump Force 47. Yeah, we had a great product to sell. We had a great product to sell in 2020, and 800,000 people didn't buy it. But they did in 2024, a significant percentage of that 800,000 that we moved to the polls. So yes, that made a big difference. So let's talk about the fish fry. The fish fry was not a Georgia GOP event. It was an 8th district. No, it was not. It was an 8th district Republican Party event. The building was not secured by the Georgia Republican Party. It was not our event. I have said time and again in multiple locations, people want to come to the state convention here in Dalton and wear paper please shirts or whatever they want to wear. You know, within reason, I guess. I mean, maybe there's something they couldn't wear. They need to wear some clothes. But we're not going to put speech codes on anybody or tell them what they can and can't wear. You know, but that wasn't our decision. That wasn't the Georgia Republican Party's decision. That's number one. Number two, in terms of making statements about it after the fact, that comes down to what I was talking about before. Every decision I made for the year and a half leading up to the election, I looked at one criteria. Is this decision going to help or hurt winning the election in November? and rehashing a controversy that at that point was, when people were talking to me about it, was several weeks old, was only going to highlight divisions within the Republican Party. It wasn't going to do anything to move the ball forward on getting election integrity legislation passed or winning an election. So no, I didn't do that because I think that would have been a mistake. And again, if you want somebody that's going to hone in and focus on internal divisions in this party and amplify those, I'm not your guy.
It's not that,
You
it's
know.
staying strong for we need to secure our elections, is what that's about.
And I've spent every free moment that I have trying to move the ball forward on election integrity legislation in this state. We got, when I got elected, we had a 4-to-1 majority on the state elections board against us on election integrity, 4-to-1. And I went to the lieutenant governor and I said, we need somebody that is at least going to give us a fair hearing on these issues. And he replaced Matthew Mashburn with Rick Jeffries. Salleigh was at that meeting. That didn't just happen. That's what leadership is about. And then we had the problem of dealing with the House, the state House's appointment, former Representative Ed Lindsay. Ed Lindsay, who was lobbying for DeKalb County, that had been a recipient of Zuckerbucks and everything else. We put a question on the ballot, on the May primary ballot, saying, do you think registered lobbyists should be able to serve on the state elections board? The Friday before the election, Ed Lindsay announced he's resigning, and Speaker Burns put Janelle King on the state elections board. That's because of pressure we applied at the Georgia Republican Party. So this notion that we've done nothing and we're not hard at work trying to improve the election integrity environment of the state is just not true. And, I would love to get all the way into the end zone, but you got to have some cooperation from the legislative branch of government and the executive branch of government. And we can talk about those people being Republicans all we want to. We have to go down there and convince them. We've got a bill that passed the House that survived crossover day. It's going over to the Senate. We're talking to senators now about adding additional election integrity measures. But I'm going to tell you this, if you put somebody in this role who just wants to burn everything down, the likelihood of you getting anything through the legislature drops to zero pretty quickly. And so my position is, and this is what the left does, this is why the left has been so successful over the last 40 years or so. They understand the value of incremental gains. And going, we got a lot in 2024, we're back in 2025 getting more, we're gonna come back in 2026 and get even more. That is how you move the debate in your direction, is by engaging in the process every year, finding your allies that will help you move what you can get moved that year, and then come back again and come back again. And frankly, I think part of the conversation around the 2026 election, as we have primaries for governor, and I think likely a primary for Secretary of State, is for the party to drive that discussion through debates and forums and ask candidates the tough questions that you're talking about. Are you willing to commit today to eliminating the Dominion voting machines and going to hand-counted paper ballots and get them on the record? Those are the sorts of things, that's the activism opportunity within the Georgia Republican Party to really move this issue forward.
That's been tried, it's been done.
Yes.
Josh, would you please share with everybody, since I've paid attention to your Senate, what you did in the Senate, would you share with them about the bill that you had in the committee that Chuck Payne voted against for people that were here illegally? Will you share with them?
Oh, sure.
Your
Driver's
forward, your
Sure.
driver's license forward thing?
Yeah, and this is something really I have to give some credit to someone who sadly passed away over the weekend. That's D.A. King. Some of y'all knew D.A.
Excuse me, what was your name, please?
Kathleen Thorman.
Okay.
And so the bill that we had was really designed to address this problem. In Georgia, when you think about photo ID, which is another election integrity measure that was passed years ago, the way photo ID works is if it is identifying someone who is eligible to vote. Georgia driver's licenses are not only issued to U.S. citizens. Georgia driver's licenses are issued to people with permanent resident status, They are issued to people who have certain classifications of visas, but they're also issued to deferred action recipients. So these are illegal aliens that basically were given a status of, we're not going to deport them right now, right? So our bill that we moved forward was to say, okay, if you're going to insist on offering driver's licenses to people who are not U.S. citizens, just like we indicate on a driver's license that someone is under 21, we're going to make the same mark on a driver's license to indicate you are not a citizen. And we tried several different versions of this. The first version I had was one that just had a long line that said illegal alien. Didn't like that. So then we tried one that said non-citizen. Then we had one that said not eligible for voting, right? And unfortunately, we have not been able to get that law over the finish line. But that is the sort of thing that we are working on. Those are the kinds of loopholes that you're trying to close. When you talk about absentee ballots, there is, in my opinion, no justification for Georgia to have no reason absentee ballots, meaning that anybody can get an absentee ballot at any time. Most of the states around us, like Florida and Alabama, if you request an absentee ballot, you have to swear that you're going to be traveling on business, or that you are sick in the hospital, or you're unable to go vote. I mean, there has to be some compelling reason involved. We had no reason absentee voting before we had in-person advance voting. And there was a mistake made when they brought forward early voting in that they did nothing to fix that no reason absentee voting. We ought to, in my opinion, have the signatures when someone is providing an absentee ballot notarized, because that's the best way to confirm that person's identity instead of having essentially the honor system. Now, thankfully, by changing some of the laws on ballot requests, we've dramatically reduced the number of paper absentee ballots that are out there. But getting an absentee ballot ought to be like driving in the emergency lane on the interstate. Something has gone profoundly wrong, and you need to be able to take this emergency action to address it. So there are a number of laws. Statewide election court, that's something we're trying to get, because we don't want to have a system where every time we challenge Georgia election law on behalf of people in Whitfield County, that we're having to argue that in front of a Fulton County judge. We think that there ought to be a statewide panel of judges that are able to hear those cases. We think the state elections board ought to have the jurisdiction to hear appeals when you say, hey, my neighbor doesn't live across the street from me anymore. They moved to Virginia. Why are they still on the voter roll? And your local board of elections, for whatever reason, won't act. That ought to roll up to the state elections board instead of it having to go to Superior Court, and you got to get a lawyer, and you got to go to all that expense. So we've got a lot of proposals that we are working in concert with Georgia legislators to get done. And yes, we're going to get some done in 2025, but remember, if we get stuff passed in 2026, it's still available for the next election. People told me, a lot of the same people that said nothing would happen this year, said we would get nothing passed in 2024. Then they said the governor would veto everything that we passed. He signed every bill. So we're going to work hard in 25 and 26 to get another package of election integrity bills through. And it's never really over, right? We discovered in this last election, when I was telling you all about Friday, November 1st, seeing all that early voting data, I got a call at 6:30 that night that Fulton County was going to open 4 elections offices to receive paper absentee ballots. And there was no vote of their Board of Elections. There was no prior notice. There was no warning at all. I got that call at 6:30. We had filed a lawsuit in Fulton County Superior Court by 8 o'clock that evening. We had a hearing at 8 a.m. Saturday morning. The judge didn't side with us because, again, it's a Fulton County judge. So then I got on the phone with Michael Watley and Laura Trump, and I said, look, we've got to expose this because we can't have these people coming in, because they weren't even letting our poll watchers in at first. And within an hour of them going on national television to talk about it, suddenly everyone was invited in. Fulton County said the public is invited, everybody can come. That is the kind of aggressive attitude and keeping your eyes on the prize that is the difference between winning and losing. And by the way, having these relationships matter. You know, I called Laura Trump and I said, you know, Laura, we got to get started on 2026. We got to raise some money, because that's the other thing I haven't really talked about tonight. But no successful political movement exists without money. You have to be able to raise money. And I called Laura up and I said, can you come to Georgia and help us raise some money? So April 1st, she's going to be in Atlanta. We're having a big dinner, and we're going to raise money so that we can begin to build the machinery we're going to need to win this election. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to encourage you to ask the delegates that are coming to Dalton in June not to stay at the Carpentry Hotel.
Okay.
That's good.
I'll remind them.
Carpentry Hotel?
Yeah, I'll remind them.
Mr. Carpentry owns it, and he is not a very good Republican.
I got that. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just, sorry, y'all. Can I address what Stacy said about the fish fry real quick from my perspective? Because I was there, and when I got there, I was walking up and there was a woman coming out and she was crying. And I'm one of those people, like if there's a wreck or if there's something, I'm the one pulling over on the side of the road, you know, and trying to help people and find out what's going on. So this woman comes out and she's crying and she said something about, they said she had to take her shirt off. And I'm like I thought she meant like just take her shirt off. And I'm like, what is going on? And I didn't know what had happened. So I stopped and talked to her. She was a resident of Peach County. My heart went out to her, and Josh will tell you, I get pretty hot over things pretty quickly. And so, you know, I'm like, what is going on? The sergeant at arms that were there were actually from Cobb County. They were all my people. And, but they were invited to be there from the 8th District. The state party had nothing to do with it. The state party, I can also tell you, was only the committee members were there, as many as there were, because we were trying to make it easy on people to have that event, to support that event, and also have the state committee meeting there so that people weren't having to travel all over the place. And so that's the reason why the decision was made to even have the state committee meeting there after the fish fry. So it was like we were there, but we weren't necessarily, the 8th District was hosting the event. There was confusion. And Josh will tell you, immediately after that, we had an executive committee meeting call. Denise was on the call, and I was not very nice. And I was, because Chan Jones, who's the district chairman, was on the call. And for lack of a better explanation, I just ripped him a new one. And Denise is shaking her head yes. And I let him know exactly what I thought about that. And that's what I'm talking about, grassroots having a seat at the table in the state party. That.
From the chair, we had that seat.
I'm sorry?
It didn't feel like from the chair at the time we had that seat.
So I would have to disagree, because I am one of those people. I got into the party and started working in 2020 during the 2020 election. So, you know, David Schaefer welcomed me when I was at Jim Miller Park and I saw what went on down there. David Schaefer was on the phone for me for an hour and 45 minutes during all that chaos, trying to help make sense of it. And Josh has not been any different. He has listened. He has put up with more than any man. You know, when you're in leadership, everybody wants it and then they get it. And then you realize what pure hell you go through. And I'm just being honest. I let it be known during that call with Chan exactly how I felt about the whole situation. It was a big deal, and I thought, you know, this is ridiculous. Fast forward, and we have developed a relationship now that there was recently an election issue in one of Chan's counties, which you didn't even mention, that the state party also provided funding for. When and it was due to districting that happened in Washington County, and so they just had a lawsuit in Washington County, and the state party came in and helped in that lawsuit too, and. Now, one of the first people that Chan called with that issue was me. And he said, Salleigh, I need your help. I said, what is it? We need money to support this issue in this race. And it was not by a lot of votes, but you know, nobody else really knows about it. But again, the state party jumped in to do that. And so my point in relating that story to you is I understand the anger and all that kind of stuff. When we had an incident in Cobb County at our caucus where somebody played an AI video endorsement of President Trump, and that's gone viral. It was a fake endorsement. It shouldn't have been played, but the person who did it did not even tell me ahead of time that they were playing a video. I was standing on stage asking the person, what are you doing? Oh, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. And then I find out it was a fake endorsement on behalf of a candidate, and it should have never happened. But then I'm having to deal with the repercussions of it right there on the spot, and you're judged for making a snap decision when you have zero time to even process what just happened. So just like the lady coming out of the building who was so upset and me trying to figure out what's going on, Josh is frequently put in positions where it's like, what are you gonna do about it? And it's like, wait a minute, let me even figure out what's going on. Let me get the facts of the situation. So when I relate that story about Chan, now guess who understands election integrity better? Chan does. And I was one of the first people he called and asked for help.
Told him what you thought about that.
That's right.
Right.
And I will always.
And she told him that in a private meeting. We didn't stream it for the entire world to see and for the Democrats to highlight and for the media to make us look ridiculous.
And I didn't go to Twitter and post it on Twitter, and I don't know what it is about this world that, like, if you don't post it on Twitter, or if you don't post it on
And
Facebook.
my first comment was he didn't speak to us in the room.
Do what now?
No conversation, thank you, I'm not.
I spoke to Garland Favorito at that meeting, so I don't really know what you're talking about.
But the other thing is that if we wanna win 2026, I look at it by the grace of God, we won 2024. By the grace of God, this country has a chance of being saved. But if we people don't start working together, and if we don't stop the backbiting and the backstabbing and things like that, and if we don't move on together, we certainly
I
don't
would
have a
love to
chance.
work with, that's the point, to work with.
I'm on the Election Integrity Committee. I am certainly happy
And
to
you
have the
mentioned
help.
the grassroots have been brought in, but I'd like to know what grassroots were brought into that.
Field Cersei, Sam
No,
Harnline.
I've talked to them, and I know well how that went, and it was a repeated request, can we have a seat at the table, we have something to present. We finally got to talk, and anything presented was pushed back, so.
That, I have to disagree with that, because there's many things that I felt like there was actually great input and reception on, but that's my perspective.
Sam's presented resolutions to state committee meetings that have all been passed, and they've been passed by wide margins.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody that wants to engage gets the opportunity to engage. We've done that in the last year and a half. Thank you.
We're out of time. You can ask them after the meeting. We always try to end at 8 o'clock because we're like 3 minutes over already.
Thank you.
So I have two speakers, just really brief. This is Ms. Denise Burns. She's the leader of the 14th District Congressional District Republican Party. She's not running for office though, but she
I'm out.
Still clap for her, Eddie.
I'm out. 4 years is enough, and a volunteer organization needs frequent change in its leadership positions in order to enable and empower grassroots people to continue to be involved. And so I am stepping into a past chairman's role on our district committee as of April 26th, and we will have new candidates for you that we have been training up and growing up in order to take these spots. And so I encourage you all to come to district convention. It'll be in Paulding County at a, Emery's applauding, at a new facility that Paulding County owns that they have just rehabbed. And so we will be very comfortable down there, have a nice lunch, and we will be electing a new slate of district officers, and we will also have new state committee seats to fill as well. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, we gained a state committee seat this time around because our vote for President Trump was so strong. So we have a lot to be thankful for. We have a lot to be proud of. So if my left shoulder is frozen, but with my right shoulder, if everybody will just a little pat on your back for such a great turnout and such great early voting. We were up over 20%. Our district historically does not vote early. We vote on election day. And we were able to add, as Josh said, so many people who voted early that our numbers were led the state in terms of the districts with early voting turnout. Josh is a very humble guy. And the last 4 years, the first 2 years I was on state executive committee, I served under David Schaefer. And the last 2 years I've been with Salleigh, serving under Josh McKoon's leadership. And Josh is a very humble guy, and he says we a lot. And until he got to the point where he addressed the primary ballot question, where he asked every Republican voter in the state of Georgia last spring on the primary whether or not the state election board chairman should be a registered lobbyist. And we all knew how that was going to turn out because hardly anybody knew that he was a lobbyist. And then all of a sudden it's on the ballot. There was no we in team on that, and there's no I in team either. Josh came up with that question. Josh forced the issue to expose Ed Lindsay as a lobbyist on the state election board, and then he had the relationship with the state house to suggest a highly competent and grassroots focused candidate to replace Ed Lindsay when he left. So all of this we business, he's very gracious when he does that because we are praying for him and we are throwing ideas at him, and I'm sure there's some sort of brainstorming impact that happens with that. The man has focus and vision, and he has our best interests at heart, and he is working with every little slice of faction of this what is now a very big tent party. Because who would have thought that Donald Trump would be our president when we all thought 20 years ago he was a Democrat? And now he's the most reasonable man in the room, and we're thankful that he's there, but it is a very big tent, and everybody's got a voice, and everybody's got his cell phone number, and they're texting him. I will send screenshots, and there'll be 480 unread messages up in the corner when he sends me the screenshot on something. The man is busy all the time, and he has our best interests at heart. And so even though I am outgoing and stepping aside, Josh McKoon has my full-hearted endorsement, because I do not believe this party will continue with its trajectory of success if he is not the chairman, given the slate of candidates that have made themselves available. Salleigh's been awesome. I'm endorsing her too. I don't even know I think she's probably scared everybody off from running against her. But I didn't know Salleigh was coming tonight because she, I guess, wanted to surprise me. I knew Josh was here. And I don't ever want somebody to drive all the way to the 14th district without a gift. And so Josh, come on up. You've heard that there's gold in Fort Knox. It's really free-range eggs. And so Josh is the happy recipient of it. I mean, I collected these today. They're super fresh. And I am sorry, Salleigh, if I'd known you were coming, I'd have brought you one too. But thanks, Eddie. Thanks for letting me talk. Y'all are great.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. We're adjourned.
I'd love to speak to y'all. I'll try to keep it short and sweet with y'all. I know y'all are ready to get out of here and get back to your house. And my name's Stephen Ratcliffe. I'm a lifetime resident of Whitfield County, and I'd like to announce my candidacy for commissioner at the next election. After seeing last night the corrupt officials we have in this county, people deserve to have a voice, and I think all of y'all in here, we're on the same page, and we need to be heard. And we need somebody in there that's not about the money and needs to say something.
Speak it up, bro.
I'm not no politician. I'm not going to claim to be one. I'm for the people, and I want to be for y'all. I just hope I can have y'all's vote.
What's your name again?
Stephen Ratcliffe.
I'm happy to interview you and get your voice out there. My page is designed to give you a voice.
I would love to get you there.
I'm one of those officials, and I'm not corrupt, so don't hook me in that basket.
Oh, no. I can say that.
running for election.
Not calling you out at all.
I think the,
Other than
and
tax month?
I think that was what had them vote the way they did, but I don't know that. You need to ask them.
We kind of
But-
felt like it was a done deal before we even, it wasn't advertised ahead of time enough for us to know that it might. We were being hurt.
Do they not realize that the tax base for that entire area is in jeopardy because of this place? If you render that land worthless as far as agriculture goes, you can't rezone it commercial. It's all floodplain. You can't build them. If you can't raise cattle in it or crops because of the plants they're building, the value of it goes to zero, which means the tax base goes to zero. They're gonna lose that tax base. Do they not realize that? Or they can? I'm sorry, I get
No,
emotional.
that's fine, and I understand. My problem with it is, for years and years, it's been agriculture. At that meeting, before the meeting, I had listened to both sides, like all of us should. And what won me over were the citizens and knowing what y'all wanted. And, you know, I was there praying about it. And I'm not saying the other ones weren't praying about it, but I asked God to show me what to do, and it was to listen. And I listened, and I voted the way I thought I should.
Thank you for that.
My name is Robert Keaton, and I certainly appreciate
Yes, sir.
the stand that you took.
If that's possible, let's
Mr.
shift
Thomas,
this way
you're
so
the
people
only
can get
one
out.
on
I'm
that
sorry.
board of commissioners
Oh, no,
that
it's not.
voted thank you for your watching.
And I appreciate it.
I'm gonna do what I can.
Come right on through.
Okay, I'll leave.
I'm not sure of anybody in this room.
Any of y'all call me
Seeing him
anytime,
speak
really.
last night.
Thank you
I'll
very
be
much.
happy to talk.
I just want to tell you something, John.
You voted
When
the
I
right way.
when I met you at a meeting, it was legal women voters. It was a forum.
Thank you, sir.
You didn't know me from anybody, and I came up to you and I told you that I wasn't in your district, and you told me if you need anything, you call me.
Right.
Man, a lot.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
I think whenever he mentioned that, he forgot to bring your name out of it.
Thanks for your all support.